Thank you to the Grove Health and Wellness for inviting me to speak. And thank you to you for getting up early this morning to join me on this exciting exploration of structured water in living systems and its implications in health. My name is Tira Ashby. I'm a chiropractor and osteopathic practitioner. I became deeply immersed in the various scientific theories on water while conducting research for my thesis in osteopathy. Recently, I've been offered a postdoctoral fellowship in Pollack Labs at the University of Washington, where I continue to study the role of water in living systems. Throughout my career, I have struggled to correlate the biology, physiology, and anatomy we learned in school with my clinical experience palpating clients. The anatomy in our textbooks looks so clear-cut, segmented, and compartmentalized into distinct systems. Traditional biology uses terms like random diffusion to describe some molecule haphazardly bumbling towards a destination, or energy expenditures, when parcels of energy are paid to molecular gatekeepers to facilitate transportation across a membrane. These are not the descriptions I would use to translate my felt experience of interacting with living systems. When I put my hands on someone, it's like I've been invited into an inner world bursting with continuity, rhythm, and flow. Like the essence of every cell is alive and breathing, and in constant interaction with its surroundings, without barriers or restraints. I searched for many years to amend this discrepancy. That is until I entered into the world of water research and was introduced to the living dynamics of the quantum body. For me, this new biology of the human body not only validates my clinical experience, but has opened a whole new world of possibilities for health. Today, I intend to introduce you to this new world by progressively building a foundation for our understanding of water. This new outlook on water will then be applied to biological water and its role in living systems. In my opinion, envisioning the human body from this new perspective is the key for the advancement of healthcare. Today, we are going to start by deconstructing our current perceptions of water before exploring the unique characteristics we are discovering in water research. We will then apply this new understanding of water to living systems, including the human body. Water is H2O, hydrogen 2 parts oxygen 1, but there's a third thing that makes it water, and nobody knows what it is. D.H. Lawrence. Water is the most revered substance on Earth, and yet still remains mysterious. Water was here long before our arrival on this blue planet, and will continue to be here long after we extinguish ourselves. Every major religion, spiritual tradition, and indigenous culture celebrates water as the sacred connection to spirit or source. Water is also the most scientifically studied substance on Earth, and we are only just beginning to understand some of its unique characteristics. Based on this research, the first myth that I want to deconstruct is there is no such thing as H2O. We are all familiar with the artist's depiction of water as these red balls with Mickey Mouse ears happily bouncing around on a background of open space. What if I said it's impossible to isolate a single molecule of H2O, as this misleading visual seems to assume? We all know that jumping into a pool of water is a much different experience than jumping into a pit of balls. So what is the difference? What is happening in all that apparent space between the red balls with Mickey Mouse ears? A quick lesson in chemistry. It would be fair to assume that the connection between hydrogen and oxygen is a hydrogen bond. However, due to the large size difference between the two, and oxygen's tendency to hoard electrons, the bond tends to be more electrostatic in nature, and therefore highly unstable. Let's put this in perspective. If oxygen is the size of a 65 centimeter exercise ball, the hydrogens would be the size of the ball at the top of a sewing pin. For those of you who feel this just doesn't seem accurate, you're right. If oxygen is the size of a 65 centimeter exercise ball, then hydrogen would be 1,000th the size of the ball at the top of a sewing pin and located 1 kilometer away from the exercise ball. Due to this immense size difference and the incredible distance between the two, the shared electron spends over 99% of its time being attracted towards, orbiting, or exiting the attraction field of oxygen, hence creating a bond that is more electrostatic in nature. Because of the instability of the electrostatic bond, hydrogen can be just as attracted to a neighboring oxygen as it is to its home oxygen, and can easily run off to check out what's happening in another part of town. In fact, any given hydrogen only spends 1 picosecond, or 1 trillionth of a second with any given oxygen. That means you will never be able to isolate a single molecule of H2O. And water doesn't look anything like the bouncing red balls with Mickey Mouse ears. In fact, water, as we know it, is a giant collection of polyamorous hydrogen protons constantly dancing around and openly exchanging information with its entire community. Why have I spent so much time reviewing the chemistry of water this morning? It is my experience that water is so ubiquitous that we never stop to consider the possibility that we really don't know much about it. Until we can confront this incomprehension, we are not open to seeing things in a different way. So it seems to me the third thing that D.H. Lawrence was pointing to in the opening quote is not just the structure or even the behavior of water, but the emerging possibilities of water when considered as part of its own ecosystem and not as an individualized element. These are the possibilities that I'm excited to share with you. If water is nothing like what we have been taught, then what is really going on with the most abundant substance found on Earth? As Michael Schiff observed, we have emerged from the genomic era and are now standing on the precipice of a new frontier in our understanding of living systems. In the next century, what water research teaches us will perhaps be considered more significant than DNA for an understanding of life. This dynamic behavior of dancing hydrogens is what we find in bulk water. Bulk water is what you would typically describe as liquid water. It is any body of water, an ocean, river, or the water in your drinking glass. Most of the characteristics we recite about water in elementary school, such as it freezes at 0 degrees Celsius and boils at 100 degrees Celsius, are the properties of bulk water. In order to stabilize itself from the thermodynamic collisions created by the protons, bulk water organizes into water clusters by equally distributing the hydrogen protons among the cluster, thereby removing them from the bulk water dance card. Martin Chaplin studies various water clusters found in bulk water. To date, he has classified close to 700 subspecies, which he has documented in a comprehensive online database of water structures. Chaplin calculates the most stable water cluster is an icosahedron, containing 280 water molecules. The lifetime of each water cluster is approximately 1 nanosecond, or 1 billionth of a second, before the bonds break and new clusters are formed. Therefore, liquid water is not the homogeneous medium of happily bouncing red balls with Mickey Mouse ears that we thought it was. Instead, water contains flickering arrays of water subspecies. These subspecies propagate in waves, where each molecule of water is completely interdependent with all of its neighbors. Rustum Roy and colleagues generated the schematic representation of the space-filling nature of bulk water, alternating between smaller molecular clusters of 2 to 4 water molecules and the larger, more stable clusters outlined in black. Although this is still a very primitive representation of the integral and dynamic nature of water, it starts to present the image of how bodies of bulk water behave as coherent wholes. We see this same coherent wholeness throughout the world around us. It is at play in starling murmurations and in schools of fish. Mark Henry describes this behavior as not just coherent, but quantum coherent. He defines quantum as anything that can be considered at a given scale as a whole unit, not separable into smaller parts. Water is the epitome of quantum coherence. Just as the starling murmurations become their own dancing entity, not due to the actions of a single bird, but because of the collective behavior and unseen communication between all of the birds, the dynamic and unique properties of water are due to the collective behavior of the entire body of water molecules interacting together. Due to this collective behavior of dancing hydrogen protons and the flickering arrays of water cluster subspecies, every body of bulk water becomes an open communication system within itself. We have spent this time reviewing the properties of bulk water to demonstrate that our common understanding of water has not progressed past high school chemistry. Having an outdated perception of water does not allow our imagination to open up to all the possible roles of water in living systems. Besides, the human body is more than a big bag of bulk water. It is when bulk water encounters an interface that the unique properties of water get really interesting. Interfaces are the boundary surface between a bulk body of water and the ecosystem it resides in. Interfaces can be found everywhere in nature. The interface between water and air, still water and moving water, or between water and another object. The human body is more than a big bag of bulk water because it's filled with other things: cells, molecules, tissues, membranes. Each of these structures creates an interface when it interacts with biological water. When water encounters an interface, any interface, it spontaneously arranges into highly organized and stable honeycomb-like sheets stacked parallel to the surface of the interface. A 60-degree planar shift between each subsequent sheet of hexagonal water electrostatically aligns the negatively charged oxygens in one layer with the positively charged hydrogens in another layer, creating a new type of structured water that is denser than ice, where each layer of the honeycomb sheet are directly aligned, and denser than the bulk water that ice floats on. Gerald Pollack, professor of bioengineering at the University of Washington, explains that we are no longer looking at water as either a solid, a liquid, or a gas, like we learned in school. Instead, he calls this newly discovered form of water the fourth phase of water. Not only does this denser, more stable, structured form of water resist the thermodynamic collisions and reconfigurations found in bulk water, but it excludes all solutes, leading to it also to being described as exclusion zone water or easy water. Easy water started to demonstrate some very interesting characteristics. Not only did it exclude solutes, it also excluded hydrogen protons, which accumulated in the bulk water immediately adjacent to it. The depth of the easy zone, and therefore the concentration of hydrogen protons, substantially increases when exposed to radiant energy, such as the infrared radiation found in sunlight. This has several fascinating implications. A stockpile of free hydrogen protons are available to provide the energy required to drive chemical reactions. In addition, the high alkalinity of the interfacial water, in juxtaposition with the highly acidic bulk water, spontaneously forms a battery capable of storing energy and generating an electrical current. To summarize, some of the distinct physical characteristics of interfacial fourth phase water include: it is highly structured, organized, and stable. It responds to electromagnetic energy in the form of radiant infrared sunlight. It excludes all solutes, including hydrogen protons, and stores this charge differential as potential energy that can assist in chemical reactions or generate an electrical current. In comparison to bulk liquid water, interfacial water has higher density and viscosity, lower permeability and temperature, and unique optical characteristics. This list is continuously expanding as new research emerges. When Dr. Polak presented this list of fourth phase water characteristics at the 2012 International Fascial Conference, I had fireworks going off in my head. What do you mean water stores potential energy and is capable of creating an electrical current? Water does this spontaneously when it bumps up against an interface? There must be thousands of interfaces in the human body. Is this what water is doing inside of my body? Thus began my journey into structured water in living systems. The amazing organizing properties of water are becoming more and more evident, which will go a long way toward explaining the detailed organization of molecules in cells and their biological functions. Mei-Wan Ho. We have all heard humans described as being 70% water. Traditionally, biological water was regarded as the inert background solvent filling the space between structural elements in a living system, and not much else. Because it was extraneous, theoretical scientists studying the structure and function of biomolecules, such as DNA, disregarded the water from their calculations. Advanced forms of imaging, like the scanning electron microscope, systematically removed the water environment with harsh solvents and cryofreezing in order to isolate the biomolecule of interest, then assume this represents its structure and function within the human body. This is the central prevailing fallacy of biological research. That when you remove an element from a living system and study it in isolation, that you can deduce its role and function in the biological system. Living systems cannot be understood by using a reductionistic model. If I wanted to study an inert system, like a toaster, and I took it apart down to its nuts and bolts, then I studied all the elements of a bolt, I could deduce the function of the bolt is to hold something together by threading it in a spiral motion, thereby contributing to the overall function of the whole system. This is a reductionistic biomechanical method of evaluation. If, however, you take a cell out of a living system, such as myself, and studied it under a scanning electron microscope, you cannot accurately describe that cell's role and function within my biological system. Just like we cannot isolate a single molecule from the collective behavior of bulk water, or a single starling from the wholeness of a murmuration, each cell in a living system is completely interdependent with every other component of an ecosystem it resides in, making the human body coherent. For me, this image looks more like a cell trying hard to protect itself from its savage new reality. In fact, considering all the harsh solvents and cryofreezing, I don't know if you could still consider this biological tissue. The paradigm shift I'm proposing here is more than looking at water differently. It's taking an entirely different perspective on living systems. As Brian C. Goodwin states, the first point to emerge is the primacy of the organism as the functional biological entity, replacing the usual definition of the cell as the unit of life. In other words, we need to consider the living system as a whole within the ecosystem that it resides in, just as we need to consider the cell within and in relation to the living system that it comes from. Ludwig Edelman started investigating ways to visualize cells while maintaining the environment they reside in. Although this tissue has still been cryofrozen, it is embedded in a resin instead of using the harsh solvents used to eliminate the extraneous water. Already, you can start to see a dynamic and interrelated continuum. Edelman concluded that stabilization procedures that involve chemical fixation and treatment of hydrated specimens with organic solvents leads to biological material in which the associated state of water and ions is almost lost. If we are unable to study biological material under a scanning electron microscope, how can we visualize the complex biomolecular interactions within a living system? Theoretical biologists turn to computer simulations of biomolecules to better understand their structure and function. This is a computer simulation of the beta-globin subunit of hemoglobin. This model gave a better idea of the components of hemoglobin, but no matter how they manipulated the model, they couldn't understand how the subunits came together to form hemoglobin in a biological system until they returned the water molecules to the picture. This changed everything. Every hemoglobin is surrounded by 7,000 water molecules. On average, a human red blood cell contains 270 million hemoglobin. That means a single erythrocyte contains 1.89 trillion water molecules. Humans may be 70% water by weight, but according to these new calculations, we are actually 99% water by molecule. In comparison, jellyfish are 99.8% water. That means humans are 0.8% less water than jellyfish. Modern science had us believing that 99% of the molecules in our body were merely the background solvent on which life played out. And most water in living organisms is never further than a fraction of a micron from a biological surface, such as a membrane or macromolecule, making almost all biological fluids structured interfacial water. Recall the interesting characteristics that structured water demonstrated. Water next to the interface excluded solutes, including hydrogen protons, that accumulated in the adjacent bulk water. Infrared radiation increases the depth of the structured zone and therefore the concentration of hydrogen protons. Water within the exclusion zone readily donates electrons, making it a reducing agent, while the bulk surrounding water serves as an oxidizer. In addition, the region of high alkalinity, in juxtaposition to a region of high acidity, effectively creates a battery capable of both storing electrical energy and generating an electrical current. In summary, biological water next to an interface is capable of generating and storing the energy required for not only the redox chemical reactions that drive vital processes within a cell, but the energy required for that cell to interact with other elements within the living tissue that it resides. All of this energy is spontaneously located at the interface between two layers of water within and surrounding the cell. Let's apply what we have learned so far about structured biological water to something we are all familiar with, somatic dysfunction. We know that the expression of health and vitality in our body depends on the ability of water in living systems to form robust, structured interfacial zones. In regions of somatic dysfunction, whether it's an osteoarticular lesion, sprain, strain, or other dysfunction, there is a diminishment or deconstruction of the zone of structured water. Deconstruction of the structured water leads to an accumulation of free bulk water and an increase in permeability and temperature, resulting in swelling and heat. A drastic reduction in the number of free electrons and protons available for redox reactions results in decreased cellular metabolism, a reduction in cellular respiration, and an increased demand for systemic energy. Finally, the reduction in protons also leads to reduction in the surface-induced flow and a lack of tisular circulation. I'm sure this is a picture that each of you can relate to. If the human body is 99% water, and almost all of that water is structured interfacial water, how does this change your perception of working with your clients? The amazing thing is, no matter which manual technique we use, we are moving the fluids. Even the chiropractic adjustment of a locked joint is the movement of a denser form of fluid within a bigger gelatinous body of fluid. This transformation doesn't just affect the area of the resolved lesion, but reverberates throughout the entire fluid matrix. Now, when we look at this image of a cell, we can envision an ecosystem where each component is intimately interrelated and interdependent, and water is no longer the inert solvent filling in the space between the structural elements, but is the active element given structure and function by the biomolecules. And just as Mark Henry defines quantum as anything that can be considered at a given scale as a whole unit, not separable into smaller parts, we can see the human body as a quantum coherent liquid continuum of living structured water that I call the quantum body. In summary, our new understanding of water and living systems demonstrates the substance that we once thought was the backdrop is actually center stage to our understanding of life. Water makes up 99% of the molecules inside the human body, and the unique properties of water are key to its coherent and integral functioning. I call this coherent liquid continuum of living structured water the quantum body. Within the quantum body resides a world where the single focus on a single cell is the fractal representation of the whole. A world where interchange is purposeful and without barriers, and communication is outside the linear constraints of space and time. A world where every dynamic interaction is mediated through an interface with highly organized water. This new image of the quantum body has many interesting implications that ripple throughout all healthcare modalities. For me, the quantum body expands the lens through which the human body can be evaluated and appreciated. It elucidates an inner world bursting with rhythm and flow, where balance and quantum wholeness reside. My contact is no longer focused on a single part, but interfaces with the totality of the being through its intelligent liquid continuum. A continuum that is experienced through the dynamic and interesting characteristics of biological water. This is the full expression of health. I feel like we're at a tipping point, where the limitations of a medical system based on an outdated understanding of human physiology are giving way to a new model of healthcare, a model that takes into account the whole instead of the part, one that has at its foundation the recognition that health is inherently perfect, and ultimately, that our health is a reflection of the perfection possible in the world around us. If you resonate with what has been presented this morning, then I think you agree with me that incorporating the quantum body into this new holistic model of healthcare is not that far from where we are, how we already approach our clients. Thank you again for inviting me to speak, and to you for taking this time to explore the wonders of water with me. It is my hope that it has inspired a renewed appreciation for this mysterious substance, and perhaps gives you pause of consideration as you evaluate your clients today. This morning's presentation is an abbreviated version of a much more detailed exploration into the various avenues of research exploring structured water and living systems. If you find this topic intriguing, I encourage you to watch for more extended lectures being released on YouTube in the coming months. If you have any exciting comments or research you wish to share, you're welcome to contact me anytime by email, or follow me on my social media platforms. If you have complaints about reviewing chemistry this early in the morning, you're welcome to talk to your colleague that organized this talk. Thank you.